Good morning. Thank you so much for joining our July Quick Tips. For those of you who are new, I'm Morgan Stentz. I'm the former roving archivist. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that today's meeting is being recorded and will be available on the Wyoming State. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today. This program is only possible thanks to the American Heritage Center, State Archives, and the Wyoming State Historical Records Advisory Board. And this program is funded by grants made available through the Wyoming SHRAB by the National Historical Publications and Records Commission and administered by the Wyoming State Archives through the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. Before we get into the topic today, I'd like to ask everyone to save their questions for the end or place them in the chat for us to go over at the end. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's session, Cale Moody from the American Heritage Center. So hand it off to you, Cale.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, everyone. Like Morgan just said, I'm Cale Moody here at the American Heritage Center at the University of Wyoming. I am going to, kind of give you guys an overview of some digitization basics for archives. It's going to kind of be a lot. I'm going to try and go through try and get you as much information as I can as possible while still fitting into our hour and leaving lots of time for questions at the end. But yeah, like Morgan said, if you have questions, just hang on to them to the end. I want to get through everything, and then I'm happy to spend time, fielding questions, getting you as much information as I can. A little bit about me. I am the Assistant Digitization Supervisor here at the AHC. I've been in this capacity for about 4 years. So we do everything from paper digitization or paper-based digitization to audiovisual digitization in lots of different areas. So we see anything from photographs. This is from a collection that's railroad related. This is from our Buddy Ebsen collection. Buddy Ebsen was originally cast to play the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz until he had an allergic reaction to the paint. So we have a bunch of photos from him that we've digitized. This is from Stan Lee's collection. This is him with Patrick Wilson. So that's not Patrick Wilson, Patrick Stewart. I'm so sorry, I said the wrong last name. But that's a photo from his collection. It's a photo from one of ours of Amelia Earhart. We also do things such as blueprints or architectural drawings, maps. So lots of different things that we see. My talk today is going to mostly look at the paper-based side because that's the most accessible side and probably the cheaper side to get started on. But I will touch on some audio-visual digitization information throughout. And if you have questions, more specific questions, I'm happy to answer those. I'm going to give you some disclaimers. What works for one institution may not work for yours, and that's okay. The American Heritage Center, the Wyoming State Archives are larger institutions. We are fortunate enough to have resources available that may not be available to you, but we are more than happy to point you in the direction of these resources that we know about and try and make them available to you. We also have more people, so we're able to institute some of these workflows that may not work for you. But that's the great thing about the Roving Archivist program is we can help you figure out what might work for your institution. So what I'm going to explain and what I'm going to talk about is from the American Heritage Center's experience, but feel free throughout this to kind of take what we give you and make it work for you. That's kind of my second point. Don't be afraid of trying things. The great thing about digitization is it's very rare. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very rare that you only get one shot at digitizing an item. most material. If you try something and it doesn't work out the first time, usually, again, there are times when you get one shot, but usually you can try again. I'm going to kind of walk through this process. It's going to jump around a lot, so it's a non-linear process. When I talk planning, you might get into digitizing and realize that your plan didn't work. And so you have to readjust and kind of replan. So again, don't be scared if you get into something and realize that you are having to redo things. That's normal. And then the last thing is, yeah, this presentation is not comprehensive. Again, trying to fit an entire presentation on digitization into an hour is difficult. I tried to narrow it down to the big things, but I'm happy to field questions after the presentation. The State Archives is there as a great resource. The Roving Archivist program is a great resource. So please reach out if you have questions that aren't covered here. So just a very quick overview on what the American Heritage Center is. If you've ever been to Laramie, you might have seen our building. It's the big cone building that's close to the athletic facilities. We started with collections, the collections of Dr. Grace Raven Hebard from about 1895 to 1935. She was a prolific collector of all things Western history related. But we were formally established in 1945 as the Western History Collection by University of Wyoming librarian Lola Hampshire. In 1976, we kind of stepped out from under the library and changed the name to the American Heritage Center, and then moved to the Cone in 1993. And to date, we house nearly 100,000 cubic feet of historic material in over 6,000 different collections. So lots of material. If you're a smaller institution, you're probably dealing with a handful of collections. But I think a lot of these processes with dealing with massive collections are easily applicable to smaller collections. So that's a little bit of who we are. Again, I'm covering a few different things. It'll be project planning and goal setting. So just kind of that first step of you have money, you have resources, you have a collection that needs to be digitized. So how do you go about kind of planning out what that'll look like, and planning for the future, doing some material format assessment. What does the collection look like? What is the material? What does the material look like? Is it in good condition? Is it in bad condition? Those sorts of things. And then structuring a realistic timeline. Like I said earlier, you can plan a timeline. There are going to be times when the timeline doesn't work out. There are going to be times when you have a grant and you have to stick to a timeline. So planning for that, but most of the time you're going to run into things that you don't plan for, unforeseen circumstances, but I'll kind of talk about those. I'll go over some tools, some standards, and some other essentials. File and metadata management. Once you've digitized a collection, how are you storing the files? How are you describing the material so that it's accessible? What are you doing with it? Those sorts of things. And then, yeah, some media-specific considerations. These are the two that I'm going to talk about, these flat paper-based materials and the audiovisual materials, just to give you sort of an overview of those. So jumping in, project planning and goal setting. This is, this first big step. So I always like to start with goals. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you digitizing for access? So you're trying to get your material out to the biggest group of people. Are you trying to do it for preservation? Do you have material that's degrading and you're trying to create a high quality copy so that you don't lose it, and you can preserve it for the future? Is it a bit of both? Here at the American Heritage Center, a lot of our digitization kind of fits into this both category. We see a lot of material that's degrading, but we're also big on access. So the more that we can give people access to, the better. while also preserving it for the future. What are you going to be using the material for? Is it going to be for research? Are you using it for exhibits? Is it for a grant project? Do you have family members that want access to it? So you need to think about these goals when you're starting any sort of big digitization project. It just kind of makes navigating it a little bit easier, and it will also then determine how you're digitizing it, and how you're describing it, and how you're making these files accessible to people. So kind of answer those questions. I talked about Buddy Ebsen earlier. This was just a short little thing that came in when we're currently working on a project digitizing some of his collection, and so our director kind of wrote this little thing up that talks about his stage plays. He wrote some stage plays in his life, and we were in talks with his widow, and she donated some money to see that section of his collection digitized. So that was the goal. We knew that we had some money coming in, and she kind of set the goal. She wanted to see these materials from these 6 stage plays digitized so that they could be made available through licensing in the future. So that was the goal there. This is a poster that, as you can see, it's falling apart. It's an old World War I poster, and the cardboard, the paperboard is crumbling and falling apart. And so the goal of that was to preserve it, because we don't know how long we'll have this original. We'll keep it and try and keep it as safe as possible, but it's inevitably going to continue to rip and break apart. This is from our rare books collection. So again, another one of these that it was decided that we should digitize some pages out of this because the binding is fragile, and so the less we were handling it, the better. So we made digital copies of some of these illustrations. This is the Court of King Arthur. So again, just kind of taking those into account when you're, again, just starting on this journey of coming up with a digitization project. Again, material formats. This is going to determine how long a project takes. So I like to say that your paper-based materials like correspondence, letters, photographs, just these very flat pieces of paper that usually are letter or legal size or smaller. These are going to be able to be digitized much faster and more accessibly. You can get scanners that are cheaper, so the entry into this type of digitization is easier. But once you start getting into more specialty formats, when I say photographic, I'm talking negatives, glass slides, anything that's a transparency. That takes some specialty equipment that costs a little bit more. Again, audio-visual material, such as your magnetic media, like cassette tapes, reel-to-reels, VHS, U-matic tapes, those sorts of things. Again, you have to use legacy equipment to digitize those. So the entry into that is more complicated and more expensive. Motion picture film, like your 8mm, Super 8, 16, 35, those sorts of formats. Again, specialty equipment. And then your oversized material. I put newspaper down here because usually you have newspapers that are broadsides, and those take bigger equipment and bigger scanners to be able to digitize and take an image of the entire thing. That's not to say that it can't be done on smaller equipment, but again, you have to take into account its condition and how much you want to kind of experiment with that. So taking that into account, again, talking about our Buddy Ebsen collection that we undertook about 8 to 10 months ago. This was a survey of that section of Buddy Ebsen's collection. It's rough estimates for the paper, the unbound and bound paper. We go by box size. So in his collection, there were probably 20 to 30 bankers boxes, which are 1 cubic foot. And yeah, we estimated that within those, you can fit about 3,500 pieces of paper. We weren't digitizing every single piece of paper from every single box. So we came up with an estimate of about 40,000 pieces of paper. And then, yeah, the other more specialty formats like cassette tapes, films, VHS tapes, those sorts of things. And then I think it's on the next slide, but I'm going to mention it here. Once we kind of have those numbers, then we have to start doing some math. All of these that fall below the paper, like your cassettes, your tapes, your films, all of these are digitized at real time. So we can't speed it up. We can't digitize a cassette tape faster than the length of the cassette tape. So if there's 90 minutes of audio on a cassette tape, we spend 90 minutes recording that audio. Paper, on the other hand, and I think this is where this next one gets into, that you can kind of speed up. So again, you have to do math sometimes, and I know that if you got into a history field, you may not always want to do the math, but just kind of figuring out how fast you can do things. Here at the American Heritage Center, we have these counts down here that are helpful to us. I would say this is useful, or it would be good for you to do your own tests once you have equipment, once you have some sort of a setup. I think it's worth it to do some sort of your own test with your own collections to get these estimates. Depending on the resolution matters. The higher the resolution, the longer the timeline. Vice versa, if you're doing a lower resolution because you don't need those really high quality copies, it'll take you a shorter amount of time just because the equipment doesn't take as long to capture that scan. So depending on your answers to the last slide of how much material you have, what kind of material, what kind of condition that material is in, will start to get you this sort of estimate. So here at the American Heritage Center, if we have material that's in pretty good condition, in other words, like it's not crumbling, it's not falling apart, it's not ripped, it's not onion paper or onion skin, because that will take longer. If it's in good condition, we can get about 20 scans per hour at 300 DPI on a flatbed scanner. If we are doing over 300 DPI, we can usually average somewhere between 6 and 12. It depends on how many items we can put on the flatbed scanner at one time. So you just, again, kind of have to experiment. This isn't information that we can just pass on to another institution. It's very personal on your workflow, your employees, your equipment, those sorts of things. So we can kind of give you an idea of where we're at, but again, figure out what works best for you, and then you'll use that in planning. So if you know that you can do about 20 scans per hour, and you're doing it at 300 DPI, then you can start to work from there to figure out how long it will take you. So if you have someone in your office for 5 hours a week, you know that you're going to be able to do 100 scans that week. And then if you're trying to do 1,000 scans, you know that it's going to take you about 10 weeks to do those. I think that math was correct on the fly, but my point still stands. You just have to figure out those sorts of those sorts of things. Like I said, specialty formats like audiovisual material is done at real time. So again, if you're trying to do those by yourself or within your institution, just kind of figure out how long the material is and add it up. If you send material off to be digitized, the vendor should provide a timeline. Even here at the American Heritage Center, there is material that we don't have the capability to digitize in-house. So we work with some vendors across the country that digitize it for us and then get us those high resolution scans back, and then they send our material back. Usually it ranges in the 6 to 8 week period. That's a pretty standard timeline for vendors, but if it's a smaller order, it may be faster. If it's a bigger order, it might be longer. Usually vendors have a minimum that they ask you to spend. I've seen it be anywhere from $500 to $1,000. That just depends on what you're sending them, how much you're sending them. But they're all super nice. They're all willing to help. So if you have questions for vendors, if you don't know of any, reach out. We can give you some recommendations. And then, yeah, reach out to them and just kind of ask. But again, that's a good thing to keep in mind is how you're going to digitize it. Are you doing it in-house? Are you going to send it to a vendor? Those sorts of things. Moving into tools, standards, and other essentials. I know that it sounds like a lot, but digitization doesn't have to be expensive or out of reach. This is where I'm going to plug the State Archive Oral History and Digitization kits. These kits are free to borrow. You can borrow them for 3 months with the potential for a 3-month renewal if there's no one waiting for them. They come with scanners and a computer and software and basically all of the stuff that you need to start your basic digitization of those kind of flat paper-based materials. Yeah, thank you, Morgan. So I would say that's a great place to start. If you don't have a budget, if you are trying to undertake it by yourself, or you have a small team, these are great. This is a great way to undertake some of these projects. Within the next one, these are kind of my recommendations for scanners. There are other ones out there. These are the ones that I'm familiar with and I've worked with. There are debates on whether a scanner is ever going to be good enough. Because I'll get there in a second. There are some guidelines that tell you that maybe these aren't the best ones, but I say that if you are capturing the image because you're trying to make it accessible or because it's actively degrading and there's nothing that can be done to save it, a copy is better than no copy. It's better to have some sort of an image that you can keep and maintain than to lose the material completely. So these are my 2 suggestions depending on your budget and what you're wanting to do. So this Epson Perfection V39.2 color photo and document flatbed scanner goes for about $120. It comes with software included that you just have to have a computer to operate. It just plugs in via a USB. And yeah, I would say it's good for documents and photos, not slides, negatives. Again, it doesn't have that transparency lid like this next option, but anything that's just a flat paper document, I would say that this is a good solution. It'll scan up to 4800 DPI, so you can get a pretty good high quality image of that material. The second one that I'm pointing out is this Epson Perfection V850. This one, again, is a huge jump in price, and I know that $2,000 is not achievable for a lot of people, but trust me when I say that there are some that go for 6 figures. So $2,000 is still relatively accessible. This is where I'll also plug grants. SHRAB has grants that you can apply for. There are other granting agencies that work with digitization all the time. So if you have a project and you're looking for some of those grants, again, reach out. We can help point you in the direction of some of those to get the funding for equipment like this. This one's good for, both documents and photos, but also slides and negatives, those transparencies. This lid has a light in the top that shines through, so it illuminates those transparencies to capture a high quality image. It also comes with, I'm blanking on the name, but plates that you can put your slides in or your film in to hold it steady while you're scanning. This one goes up to 6400 DPI. And then this one has this upgraded laser soft imaging Silverfast SE Plus software included for free when you purchase it. We at the American Heritage Center use Silverfast for our scanning software. So this is a great software to kind of get started with. So again, those are my recommendations, but if you're looking for anything else, any other recommendations, feel free to reach out. This is some software. We use Adobe Acrobat and Photoshop. Those are kind of our two big ones that we use, but we do use other ones. Adobe Acrobat's really good if you're trying to make access files, because you can put them into a PDF and then you can save what's called a PDF-A or a PDF archival file. Basically, once you turn it into that file can't be edited by other people the way that I understand it. So it kind of just keeps it to that standard. And then Microsoft Office, Word and Excel are kind of the two big ones. I'll talk about Excel more here in a second, but having access to those softwares, I wouldn't say is required. There are alternatives if you are looking for cost-effective measures. Google Sheets. If you sign up for a free Google account, you can get access to Google Sheets and Google Docs in place of Word or Excel. Unfortunately, no one has really shut down Adobe for taking over that sort of industry. So I would say, if you can find an alternative to Photoshop, great, but Adobe Acrobat is really kind of the industry standard right now. So those ones you just have to work with. Like I said, digitization can be expensive if that's what you need. Overhead scanners like Zoichels or book scanners can be extremely expensive. But if that's what you need, like I said, there are grants that can be applied for to fund those sorts of equipments. Setups for audio, visual material can be inaccessible and expensive to set up. More and more, the legacy equipment that you need to play these legacy formats are becoming less and less. We at the American Heritage Center right now are trying to fix our U-matic players because they are slowly degrading and they're very expensive to have repaired. So we're looking into some options there, but yeah, so that can be kind of out of reach, but yeah, grants are available and they can help offset the costs of that. They can also help offset the cost of sending material to vendors for digitization. We've seen that where, oh yeah, good. Thank you, Cindy. GIMP is a good free alternative to Photoshop. Yeah, I was going to say there are some things that it doesn't do, but if it does what you need it to do, free is better. But yeah, so last thing I'll kind of talk about here, this is what I was alluding to earlier. You're probably going to hear the term FADGI. When you work in digitization, FADGI is kind of your top guidelines that you have to try and follow. These are these guidelines that were developed in partnership with the Library of Congress and the U.S. National Archives and a variety of other institutions around the country. It's a 129-page document outlining in depth the process for digitizing cultural heritage material. So yeah, it can be intimidating. I'm not here to tell you that you should read the entire 129-page document, but there is a lot of great information in there. But the part that I pulled out, this is probably what you're going to hear most when you hear about FADGI. They use this 4-star rating system for digitization. So essentially, 1 star is your lowest. It's kind of the like starting point. If you can't do anything else, hitting a 1 star is fine. But here they say that 2-star conformance is the minimally acceptable rating for most professional digitization activities. So aim for 2-star if you can, but kind of hitting these standards, reading into them, seeing what's the best for you is the most important part. Let's see, I think, yeah, so this next one, again, the Roving Archivist website has a great resource for this. They kind of take these FADGI guidelines and put them into a much more accessible, a much less intimidating format. So I just took this screenshot. This is for photographs. So it tells you if you're trying to make a master or preservation copy of a photograph, this is kind of what you should aim for. It tells you your file formats, your bit depths, your spatial resolution, dimensions, all of those things. If you're just trying to create an access copy or a thumbnail, obviously you can see that spatial resolution, that file format, those slowly just go down across the board. Your TIFF file, that master or preservation file, is a much bigger file. So here in a second, we'll talk about digital storage. So that's another thing that you have to take into account, is you could have 10 TIFF files that take up a gigabyte, or you can have 40 JPEGs that take up a gigabyte. So it just depends on, again, what you're trying to do with the material, what the end goal is when you're kind of evaluating and making those plans at the very beginning. Okay, so metadata, both descriptive and technical metadata. Remember that metadata means data about data. So when you create a digital file, your metadata is what describes that file. Kind of the industry standard for metadata descriptions is Dublin Core. So I put a link in here that kind of gives you those basics for what metadata should look like. I'm going to go into them a little bit more here in a second, but basically your descriptive metadata pertains to the metadata that describes the content of the material. So if you have a photograph, your descriptive metadata describes what the photograph shows. So whether it's in color, whether it's in black and white, if there are people, do we have names for those people? Do we have, if it's a landscape, do we know where that landscape was taken? So you're essentially describing the contents of the material. Then your technical metadata pertains to the metadata that describes the digital file. So here in a second, I'll talk about our technical specifications. That just tells you what DPI it was scanned at, what the file type it was scanned at, or the master file or access file is, those sorts of things. Again, the descriptive metadata, that's going to be more important for your researchers. They obviously want that information if you can give it to them. So whoever your audience is, they will probably look more towards the descriptive metadata. But your technical metadata is really good because let's say you're publishing a book and you're looking for an image and it was scanned at 300, but your publisher actually needs the file to be at 600. That's where you can kind of find some of that information. It's good on the back end. So those of you that are kind of running the archive, or library or museum, you can look back. So I know that we at the American Heritage Center will look back at things that were digitized 20 years ago, and we will use the technical metadata to tell us, okay, was that a master file that was created at that time? Is that still meeting the standards of a master file today? If not, it becomes a contender for re-digitization or remastering. So that's kind of what metadata does. Here at the AHC, we use what we call modified Dublin Core. So this is kind of the worksheet that we work off of. We have all of these fields from identifier all the way down to contributing institution. But we just use this worksheet as kind of a cheat sheet to tell you what your metadata should contain. So this is where Excel is really great. We use Excel sheets that each of these categories gets a column. So your identifier, this is going to be some sort of a scan number, which we kind of double up because of how we upload things onto our website. So we give something a scan number like this, where it's the collection number and then a unique number for that material. But your kind of blue fields up here, these are kind of your descriptive metadata fields. Obviously, your description is your big one. It facilitates discovery, but some of these, like the format one, over here, these digitization specifications, these are where you can see these are those fields that tell you the technical side, and how things were scanned, how things are stored digitally, those sorts of things. So I can always come back to this, but that's just an overview of what we do. And yeah, I'll give Morgan my slides. So if you ever need to refer back to this, please use it. File management, so something that works for you. This is going to be different. I'm going to explain to you how we do it. But again, this is just because we have the budget to do it this way. But we use servers that are administered by UWIT. So this is just an example of one of them. While we're working on a project, it goes into whatever employee is working and digitizing. It goes into their working folder so they can keep it organized. And then every collection gets a folder that's titled in this exact same way. So this number here, this is, like I said earlier, every collection that we have has a number associated with it. So obviously this Morrison collection, the collection number is 00323. So every, that folder will have that, and then an underscore, and then a shortened title. So usually it's the person's name. If it's a person, we deal a lot with UW or university related departments. So it might be a shortened form of their name, whatever it might be. But every single collection has a folder that's titled in this way. So if we are looking for something from that collection, we know that we can go in here and then we'll see this. So we divide it up this way. This doc folder, I'll show you here in a second, but that's where we store things like Excel sheets that have the metadata in them. This master folder is where all of the scans live. So all of the TIFFs or JPEGs for that collection. And those are all organized in this box and folder level. And then the scans. And then we have this PDF folder that essentially, once we're at that point, we create a PDF that contains all of the scans from a folder, and then we'll use that. So yeah, once you click into this master folder, this is what it looks like. So it's box 10 folder 1, box 10 folder 2, so on and so forth. So we know if we need to go back and look at the content from box 10 folder 7, we can go into this folder and see all of those scans. Once you click into those, then you'll see that every single scan has a unique scan number. So I know it's small, but this first number, it's AH, that's just an old designation, and then that collection number again. underscore, and then a unique scan number. So these are all sequentially numbered 1 through 22. So we know that if we ever have to find a specific scan of a specific page, we can go and find that. This is that doc folder that I was talking about. So within that, we have the metadata. So it's that Excel spreadsheet that has all of that information that I talked about on the last scan or on the last slide. So that's how that's organized. So that's kind of metadata. I don't want to overwhelm you too much with that. I'm happy to answer questions, but it can be a lot. But then you have to think about, how are you going to store all of these materials? How are you going to store all of this stuff that you digitize? So there are some questions that you should ask yourself. How are people accessing the materials, both internally and externally? Because you're going to have to access them somehow, and you don't want it to be harder than it needs to be. But sometimes you have to give a little bit to or you have to make some concessions in some areas to maybe save money or save space. So, but it should be as easy as possible for everyone. How are you preserving the material? Because if you're scanning it, you should probably want to preserve it as long as you can, as long as possible. So there are some steps to take there. If you are creating those really high quality copies, those master or preservation files, you want to be able to preserve those forever if you can, because they are as high as you can get right now, until maybe technology exceeds that. But there are some different things to take into consideration. You have your industry standards, but you also have reality. So industry standards are always going to tell you that you should have multiple geographic locations in multiple regions. So if you have one copy that's housed in your building, industry standards always going to tell you that you should have another copy across the globe, so that if something were to happen locally, then there's another copy somewhere else. You have to decide if that's worth it for your institution, because sometimes that's just not feasible. It's not feasible for whatever multitude of reasons. Multiple backups, kind of that same vein. This one's a little bit easier to do. If you're storing things on, let's say, a hard drive by 2, so that if one hard drive corrupts, hopefully the other one is still in a condition where you don't lose that information. So making multiple copies in multiple locations is good. Bit rot and checksums, just like physical material, digital material can degrade over time. So getting into checking that those files are staying the exact same. And if there's software that helps you do this, but it can check those digital files for you and tell you if something has changed from the last time you checked it. And if so, then you can pull one of those multiple backups and replace that file, so that it is back to being as perfect as possible. And then price. Yeah, the more that you access the material, the more expensive it becomes. We're running into this problem here at the AHC. We need things to be pretty immediately accessible, and it runs us about 6 figures every year to keep that up. So we're trying to figure out some alternatives, but it's, yeah, one of those things that you just have to decide what works best for you and what works best for your workflow and how you're using the material, I guess. So the last thing I'll say is these kind of media specific considerations. I kind of like to start this with the gloves question mark, because I feel like that's the one that most people ask when they talk about archival material, is, do I need to wear gloves to handle that? And the answer is sometimes. I would say the vast majority of material that most people will be working on will be paper, and the kind of industry standard for that is just very clean, dry hands. Once you add gloves, you start losing that tactility in your fingertips, and it makes it easier to rip pages or miss pages. So clean, dry hands are kind of the industry standard, both for paper and magnetic media. So cassettes, VHS tapes, if you have to work with them. And then, yeah, just remember while you're working, try not to touch your face, your hair, or anything else while you're working. The purpose of the clean, dry hands is to get rid of the oils and the different things that might be on them. Once you touch your face or your hair, you get that oil back on them, and they're no longer clean. So while you're working with these, just make sure that you are only touching the paper. And then for photographs, motion picture film, groove media, things that the oils can actually degrade the material. And not saying that it won't degrade paper or magnetic media, but photographs and motion picture film, the emulsion degrades very quickly if it's exposed to the acidity and the oils in your from your skin. And then groove media can clog those grooves, and then you lose quality. So industry standard says nitrile gloves. So just making sure you have some of those on hand. I gave this link to Gaylord Archival. They have this article that says for the glove of preservation. It's a good resource. It kind of gives you a rundown of a lot of different types of media to remember, and kind of gives you what you should do for each one. Since we're talking mostly about paper-based material, these are just some things, like I said, that you should think about. Paper, especially early paper, can be very acidic. So I was thinking about newspaper when I was talking about this. Newspaper is very acidic. It becomes very brittle and crumbly the longer it sits. So just making sure that you are taking good care if you have that and you're trying to digitize that. Your condition, whether something is ripped or breaking or torn or whatever it might be, just making sure that you are handling it gently. Like I said, with photographs and motion picture film, you never want to touch the face of a photograph or the face of film, because you can leave scratches, you can put fingerprints in the emulsion, like all of those things. So just making sure that when you handle those sorts, you are handling them either by the edges, or if it's a photograph, maybe it's within a clear plastic sleeve. So you handle the sleeve instead of the photograph, whatever it might be. Just protect the emulsion as much as possible. And then inks. We have encountered paper where certain inks have degraded the paper to the point where all of the letters have popped out of the page, and the page is essentially holy because the ink degraded that paper over time. So I linked some of these pages down here. So again, the Roving Archivist website has a great page on conservation of materials that gives you more of these considerations for lots of different types of material. And then I linked the Library of Congress preservation page. Within that, over on the side, there's a panel, and you'll see the term collections care. That one's a great section to kind of refer back to, because it gives you a lot of different material types and how you can make sure that you're handling them correctly and caring about them correctly. So that is my spiel. I kept it to 50 minutes, tried to give us as much time for questions, but that is a quick rundown on digitization. It's a huge undertaking, but it's worthwhile, and it's really cool to get to handle these materials and preserve them. So I urge you to ask questions. If you need resources, reach out, and we're happy to help.
I am going to throw the Roving Archivist pages in the chat for people to
Please.
refer to. But
Yes.
Go ahead, Becky.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kale. That was really, really, really good. What do you recommend for the preservation of the print materials post digitization?
Are you talking the physical material?
Yes.
So it depends on what kind it is. Do you have any examples?
Let's say old family photos from the 1800s.
Okay. So this gets into storage, which I'm not as well versed in, but here at the American Heritage Center, we use their Hollinger boxes. I'm sure that most people know about Hollinger boxes. And then we tend to sleeve photographs individually. When I say sleeve, it's not straight across the board done the same way. Sometimes we'll put photographs into acid-free little envelopes, make sure that the envelopes don't have any sort of adhesive on them. Again, any sort of an archival supply will have those. Or you can do and I'm probably going to say this wrong, is it polypropylene? Is that the
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's it.
Perfect. So, or those sorts of sleeves. Something that, yeah, you essentially just want to put the photos in something that if they're handled in the future, you're handling the envelope or the sleeve versus the photograph.
Okay.
What that also does is it separates the photographs, because if you store them all together and they're touching, the emulsion can get stuck to another photograph, and then there is zero way to reverse that. And it can rip the picture off of the photograph, and then you can't get it back. So just leaving them individually is best practice. Yeah, it's up to you kind of on whether you want the paper sleeve or the polypropylene sleeve, the plastic. We tend to use the plastic sleeves because then you can pull the image out, you can see it, and then you don't have to handle it. It just stays in the sleeve, but that's an expense that you just have to figure out on your side. But those are kind of what we do. And then within that, usually our collections, there's like a section of photographs that kind of go together. So then we'll put those photographs in some sort of a manila acid-free folder to keep those together.
And those plastic sleeves are acid-free?
Yeah, so the polypropylene sleeves are acid-free.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Thomas in the chat said, what do you mean by the more you access the material, the more expensive it is? Like, will it degrade it and be more expensive to preserve? Okay, I'm going to go back a couple of slides. So this file and metadata management down here, I say the price. The more you access the material, the more expensive it becomes. When you store digital material, depending on how you store it, you have to take into account how you access it. So what I mean by that is, and I'm going to use the AHC as an example, we store material in two different ways. We have servers, which are what we call hot storage. Hot storage is a storage that is immediately accessible. I can go in right now, right at this second, and pull up any of the hundreds of thousands of objects that we've digitized. I can pull that up. Hot storage is very expensive. So if you want those files immediately accessible, it's going to be more expensive. On another side, our Born Digital department, which they handle material that is all created in a digital format. So think a digital camera. You get a raw file or a TIFF or a JPEG directly out of the camera. We, in our Born Digital side, we use what's called cold storage. Cold storage is where we store those master files. We currently use Amazon S3, Glacier, archival storage to store those, that cost significantly decreases, because once they go in, you are essentially saying that you don't want to access them, because it's very cheap to put something in. It's very expensive to then get it back out. I think we pay fractions of a penny for every file that we upload, but if we were to want to then get those back out, it's very expensive to do so. That's called an egress fee. So it just depends on whether you want the hot storage so that the stuff is immediately accessible. You're paying that cost kind of across the board. It all kind of evens out, whether you're putting more material in, you're just getting it, like you're able to get it right back out, versus do you want it to be cheap to put in and then harder to get back out. When I say that we put everything into cold storage, that doesn't mean that we don't have a copy that we can access. It doesn't mean that we can never access that material again, because we do create an access file that we can access and put on our hot storage for us to access at any time. But that also kind of goes for if you're going to store things on hard drives. If you want a faster hard drive, something that will upload material or download material faster, you're going to pay for that. So you just have to kind of weigh, that access versus expense, and what that looks like for you. Okay, Sierra said, when it comes to media digitization audio and you have items that can convert them, what would you use as a practice run, especially if you don't have something to practice on? I have a cassette converter, but I don't want to use any of our cassettes in case something goes wrong. So what would, okay, no, that is not a dumb question. And we get it all the time. Goodwill, thrift shops are your best friends. I can't tell you how many VHS tapes or how many cassette tapes or things that they just have sitting on their shelves. Go pay 50 cents for some cassettes that you can use to practice on. You can use those, and if they break or they tear or they get destroyed, it doesn't matter. If you want something that, because this is another thing, magnetic media constantly degrades. There is no stopping it. From the date of creation to the end, it will not stop degrading. So the other thing is if you want some good cassettes, look at how many artists are releasing their music on cassette tapes anymore. So these are brand new. They are more expensive, but that's $20 that you can spend on, say, an artist that you like, and you can use their music kind of as a test case to just give you some sort of a practice run. So yeah, I would say thrift shops, or heck, like I said, new artists nowadays, because of nostalgia, they're releasing cassette tapes. So grab one of those, because then it's not collection material and you don't really care if you mess it up. Oh, so remote.
I will say Amazon does have some cassettes that you could have shipped. Marvel specifically has the Guardians of the Galaxy music on a cassette for like $9.
Yeah.
So. Well, any other questions? Right. If not, Kale has his information on the screen. I am sending the roving archivist stuff in the chat. But thank you, Kale, so much for sharing all of these fun tips and tricks and giving really a good overview of like considerations and what to do when you're starting a digitization project. I really appreciated that. Our next session for Quick Tips will be on August 21st at 10 a.m. and it'll cover oral histories with Robin Everett from the Wyoming State Archives. If any other questions come up after we log off, please feel free to reach out using any of the contact information. Otherwise, thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.